Hello, YouTube. I want to offer some advice to potential people who are looking for a job, considering UPS as an employer. It's United Parcel Services. United Parcel Service is the worst employer that I've ever had, other than Walmart. I've worked for both, I've worked for others. I experienced more abuse and harassment at UPS than any job that I've ever held in my whole life. They would steal time off my check. They would cuss at me. Workers, on more than one occasion, threatened to hit me in my work area. The worker was not reported to the police. In one case at all, nobody reported any of these transgressions. Human Resources did not have my back. They made me and the employee who threatened me sign a non-harassment form, even though I hadn't done anything. I was in my work area and I literally hadn't said anything to this person who threatened to attack me for getting after him for being on his phone, even though I was in a truck where all this workflow was coming to me. And he was all tatted up. He looked like an ex-con, like somebody who had just been released from prison. And he did not want to work, this person, in one particular situation. And keep in mind, this environment that we were working in was between 120 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. It's an 18-wheeler. In the heat of summer, the hottest days around August. And it was made out of solid steel. We were 80 feet into the truck with no fans and no circulation. And it was just constant. The trucks would get backed up. We'd get buried inside the trucks with workflow pouring off the conveyor system onto the floors because they were trying to ram the system with the unload. They would double up, put 2 or 3 workers in a truck unloading, and then have one guy, sometimes not even one guy, in each truck in the outbound, loading feeder trailers. And one guy trying to load an 18-wheeler is going to have a heck of a time trying to keep up with the kind of workflow they would send. Sometimes it'd be 500 or 600 packages an hour or more. Sometimes it'd be a couple of thousand an hour. If we got coupons, it was just absolute madness. Imagine getting 2,000 coupon boxes that are 32 pounds each in an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. Just imagine having to pick them up and turn and place each one by one. It's like a blitz. You can't even imagine it unless you've seen it. And we'd have supervisors, full-time managers, and part-time managers that would be coming in, and they'd be so frenzied simply trying to deal with what was going on as everything came crashing down literally onto the floors and out of the conveyor system everywhere, just making a huge mess. These men would be absolutely in a state of near panic, running around, throwing stuff, throwing tantrums as they're melting down. Just imagine a guy who's making $80,000 a year in a polo shirt and slacks, who's pissed off that you cannot keep up with this insane workflow they're trying to jam down the throats of everybody. And he's getting in your work area and he's throwing stuff and calling you out by name in front of other people and cussing at you because either you or one of your coworkers or everybody there is not moving as fast as they would like you to move for $8.50 per hour. That is literally what I experienced. And then I'd have missing days, missing hours on my check. Under more than one supervisor, that happened for years. And I stayed for the health insurance because I had a wife that was sick. She had respiratory infection all the time, constant illness all the time. And I thought it was congenital. She had a hidden drug addiction, an opioid dependence that I didn't know about. She ended up dying. I got sick after she died. The company fired me after almost 9 years there. And I was in the hospital right before they fired me. I had 2 hospitalizations and a bunch of emergency room visits because I developed a serious illness after my spouse died. And now I deal with chronic adrenal fatigue and exhaustion. I gave the best years of my life to UPS when I was in my 20s, and my health ended up wrecked. I have arthritis in my hands and my feet because I did such intense hard labor there in the heat and in the cold without climate control, in filthy conditions with chemicals and particulate getting circulated around in the air by heavy equipment in the warehouse, packages getting ground down in the conveyor system literally into a fine black and brown powder because they would overload the circulation system. The whole operation was run so half-assed, you just can't even imagine it. People's stuff was getting broken constantly. Things were falling from 2 and 3 stories up from this overwhelmed conveyor system because they'd be jamming the flow into the sort system so heavily that people's goods would be falling from elevation, going over the edges of the safety railing and hitting people in the head. We had an engineer who actually got struck in the head with a pipe and had to have brain surgery because another supervisor was breaking a jam above him, and the pipe split the guy's head open, and he ended up with permanent, very, very serious injury and had to have, he's going to have lifelong treatment. The guy was very seriously injured. It was very, very significant. They fired the supervisor who was responsible. The supervisor was a great guy. He had a shit work area. It was terrible. He had a very heavy flow that was always coming to him. They were always overwhelmed back there. I knew the guy by name. His name was Lawrence. He worked on PD5. And he would give hot dogs to people every week. He would bring hot dogs and hot dog buns, ketchup, mustard into the work area and pay out of pocket for these things. The company didn't pay for it. He paid for it because he wanted to reward the workers. He's a great guy. But they were sending dangerous objects through the system, and the safety rails, the guard rails, would be overwhelmed. They'd be stacking stuff 3, 4, 5 layers deep, mountains of packages that would just literally be pouring out of the sort fit system and dropping 5, 6, 7 feet into the truck, and sometimes dropping out of the truck and falling on the ground and going flying across the warehouse because they were overloading it. They were sending stuff through the system from the sort aisle they weren't supposed to be sending. I would have steel pipe and round cylindrical objects made out of metal wrapped in plastic and tape and cardboard come flying down like cannonballs into my truck. You could hear these things moving through the building, through the elevated sort system on the conveyor belts and slamming into the walls, the metal walls, as they were traveling. And you knew that something very, very dangerous was coming when you could hear this. And all you could do was, run out of your truck and take cover. Sometimes you'd have to shield behind a set of rollers. There's a strike plate at the end that can provide partial protection. And these things would get struck so hard by these objects that it would snap the steel plate off, the protective plate at the end that functions as a handle to pull the rollers out and push them in. When I'm talking about occupational hazard, danger that's extreme, these objects that would come through the system and fall down those sloped slides at a steep grade would be coming down at a speed of 30 to 40 miles per hour or more. They would be moving at high velocity, and they would weigh anywhere between 50 and 200 pounds. I'm not exaggerating about the cannonball thing. There were a number of times I almost got hit. I was scared when I would come into work. And I would work my ass off to try to keep that system clear. Wherever I was at, whatever truck I was in, I was trying to keep it clear all the time, because once you would get messed up, it'd be very, very difficult to catch up. And stuff would start getting destroyed, and it would turn into a mess. And we'd have chemicals bust open, dangerous things like stuff that if you got it on your skin or you breathed it in, it would be a hospital trip. You'd have chemical burns on your skin, on your face. You breathe it in, you might die. We had a cloud of poisonous acidic gas flood the building one day because one of these hazmat packages that was marked got dropped. That was on PD2 in the work area, one of the areas that I worked in, and I saw it happen. And as soon as I saw that white cloud flooding the building, I was running for the door. I told my other coworkers, look, there's a hazmat leak. Something's wrong. They're not sounding the evacuation alarm. We need to stop working. We need to get out of the building. Something terrible is happening. And it took them a few minutes to realize that we'd had a major spill, but they evacuated us, and they kept everybody out for 3 hours. I told them I'm going home. I'm not waiting until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to get back into the building after there's been a major chemical spill. It's ridiculous. I want to stand in the parking lot for hours waiting for the fire department to clear the building and ventilate this toxic, corrosive substance that was in the air. I got struck in the head by a piece of equipment right up here. Cut my face open. They demanded I come back to work the next day. They didn't give a damn about it. I got pinned against another piece of equipment by a metal pipe that fell off of one of their E-Reg trains because there was no load retainer on the side of the train. And they did not give a damn. They wouldn't take me to the hospital. I had to go on my own. Ended up with a hospital bill. I had to have x-rays. And it was just one thing after another all the time. They didn't care. They would leave, bolts on the floor, large amounts of broken glass on the floor, thumbtacks, those retail security devices that have a sharp, long metal point on them. Thousands of those would be spilled inside the pub, on the floor, and inside the trailers. We would have motor oil spilled on the floor inside the warehouse from the trucks because the trucks had leaks, or the mechanics had spilled oil and antifreeze and they left it in a puddle on the floor when they were topping the trucks up or changing the oil. It was ungodly hot in there in the summer. People would heat stroke and they'd have to be carried out of there by stretcher. It didn't happen extremely often. It happened often enough that it was alarming. Our water fountains would be broken. Sometimes they'd be in pieces. People would run into them with trains. They would drop heavy, irregular sized packages on them, and it would break them. They would use them so much that the compressor would go out and the water fountains would be hot. The floors in the lower bathrooms, on the base floor of the men's rooms, would be covered in piss. The toilets would be overflowing. There was graffiti on the walls in the bathrooms. There was crap smeared on the walls. It was disgusting. It was terrible. It's the worst bathrooms I've ever seen. It was even dirtier than a truck stop that wasn't kept up. And the only place that there was AC is in the supervisor's offices. And they would be absolutely pissed when they came out to have to work in the warehouse because they absolutely hated being out there. These guys, one supervisor, and I'm not exaggerating here, one full-time supervisor would make as much as the next 10 part-time employees would make. And the part-time employees worked infinitely harder. It was so much harder on those part-time workers, only making between, $8,000 a year and a maximum of $15,000 a year take home. And it was just ridiculous. If you didn't get at least 12 hours a week on your part-time check, they would send you a warning letter telling you they were going to cancel your insurance and your kids' insurance. Most of the workers that stayed there stayed for health insurance benefits. And they were so stingy with the hours that even that was at risk of being taken away. We had Aetna, then they took away those benefits, and they downgraded everybody to Blue Cross, which had 80% coverage and 20% out of pocket. Aetna used to be just $10 for the doctor's visits, and prescriptions were supposed to be free, and ER visits were supposed to be free. They dropped Aetna because the company got stingy and greedy, and we started to get larger medical bills. It was getting worse when I left, and I heard that they gave everybody raises under a recent contract. It's 2025 now. I left in 2018, but it hasn't changed that much. I've talked to people, and it's a shit show. When you're a part-time worker in the warehouse, it's terrible. I was a really hard worker. They would fight to get me to come to different work areas at the hub that I worked at. And other people, they'd be sending people home. If they get full and it was slow, they didn't think they were going to need me, I'd get flexed out. I'd get sent home. I would lose a day or two a week, sometimes up to 3 days a week of work that way. I didn't mind because I wasn't the main earner in my household, but at the same time, when it got to the point where it was so many hours I was losing that my health insurance was at risk of being lost, then I'm like, man, I can't do it. I have to work. I have to. If you're a single parent, UPS is not for you. It's not a good company to work for. They won't work with your child care needs. They won't work with the fact that you have to come in late if you have a babysitter. They are not negotiable for student schedules or for parent schedules. If you have after-school events and things like that, if you're considering working on the twilight shift, it won't work. If you have another job, they will not work with the other job if you have to leave early to go to the other job. They're very inflexible. Management is rude. It's not like other workplaces. They're very, very unprofessional. And human resources is not helpful. If your supervisor won't work with you, human resources is even worse. They'll tell a pregnant woman that she can lift up to 150 pounds, that she needs to be like women were on the farms back in the old days, doing hard labor, that they can do hard labor while very, very pregnant. If a doctor gives the woman a lifting restriction because she's pregnant, the company will tell the woman she can't come to work as soon as she presents the letter, and they will cancel her health insurance. I swear to God. They won't give you an accommodation in a light duty position, like working in small sort, just handling the small parcels and envelopes that are light. They'll tell you can't work. And the EEOC actually sued them because of this and made them pay all the women who had gotten pregnant that had been discriminated against a settlement check on account of that discrimination. UPS had to settle a whole class of lawsuits because of that. I don't know if their policies have changed, but they weren't even giving women breaks to not breastfeed, but to collect breast milk, nursing mothers, They just had a baby. Well, they need a break to go and pump for a little while and save their breast milk because they got a baby at home, There are women who were getting pregnant, and the company was not working with them, especially part-time women. And it just goes on and on. I mean, there's so many different things. The supervisors had so much discretion in terms of how they would violate people's constitutional rights, their civil rights, their parental rights. And there were illegal searches that would be done at the guard shack of people. Them telling people to disrobe when they didn't have any proof they'd done anything wrong. They would drag people back from the guard shack to the office inside the building and have them disrobe in front of security on general suspicion. Tell people with religious beliefs they had to take their hair down so they could search their hair because they thought that they were stealing on account of having a special hairdo. You know, it was a lot of different things. And it felt very, very much like when we would go to work, because I had other family that worked at UPS too. I mean, I'm like one of many people that worked there. That they were bringing people into a prison. It felt like entering a penal institution, and that you were being discharged through some high security facility, like a government facility. You know, like, it's not an intelligence agency. Yeah, they move gold and silver and stuff like that in high value packages. I'd seen it before while I was there. I used to help them with asset protection. And they treated people like criminals. They did. They treated people like criminals coming in and out. They don't even want to let you, and this is a big deal too, they don't even want to let you bring a phone in if you're a single parent, or if you've got a sick dependent at home, somebody who's disabled, you know, somebody that you have to check up on. You'd have to get a sticker. And there would be periods, there would be droughts where no sticker would be allowed. And if somebody called the building looking for you, they could not reach you. They would not be able to reach you in an emergency. They'd have to call the tower number, and then it would be at the supervisor's discretion if or even when to tell you, if they told you what was going on, whatever emergency was happening. Sometimes there wasn't even anybody sitting in the tower to answer the damn phone. So you'd have to sneak your cell phone in, you know, inside of your socks or inside of the cooler, you know, between the shell and the outer canvas wall of the cooler, or some other creative method of sneaking it in order to be able to text or receive calls from friends and family that you were responsible for. And it ended up being a very serious thing on a number of occasions, because one time I was at work and I got a message that my wife had been involved in a very serious car accident, and that the car had ended up in a ditch, and they would not let me leave. The company would not let me leave. They didn't want to let me go. And I just told them, you know what, to hell with it, you can fire me if you want to. I have to leave now. This is a major emergency. And it took me until the next morning, about 4 hours of searching, before somebody finally came and brought my wife home, because I could not get a hold of her on the phone. And I found out the next day that the car was in an impound yard somewhere, you know, 20, 30 miles away. Couldn't find the car, didn't know what police department any of this had happened with. Couldn't get her on the phone. And I had to pay a huge fee to get the car back. The car was damaged. It had substantial collision damage from being wedged into the ground. It had jumped a curb, gone into airborne. It was a wet, rainy night, and she had been using substances. I wasn't aware that she had an addiction problem. She was drunk or she was high when she crashed the car. And it was just a disaster. Even with all that crap that I was dealing with, the company didn't care about any of the personal struggles that I had. There was a crisis hotline. And the company actually canceled the crisis hotline for workers. They don't care. It's worse than Walmart. There are corporations, and then there are monsters. And the way UPS operated, they were operating like monsters. I can't say that it's like that at every location. I think it varies greatly from location to location because of management, but I've made a lot of videos about UPS because I want people to know what it's like. I want things to change for the company, and I don't want people going into an environment where they're going to be suffering, you're going to get hurt, and they're going to be having to buy their own equipment. We had to buy our own boots, and the boots would cost almost as much as a week's pay. That was, how little they paid us. I'd have to buy my own coolers, my own boots, my own socks, my own gloves. I'd have to buy furniture polish because they would not keep the slide wax to keep the slides lubed so that the packages could slide down through the conveyor system. We would have to use Pledge or Great Value or some other off-brand white furniture wax that you spray on to make the slides ultra slick, because they would not pay for the supplies we needed simply to keep the operation flowing smoothly, and the stuff would get stuck on the metal slides, these almost like the old playground slides that they had. And it was constant. It was always something. The packages would get stuck up the conveyor system. They'd send stuff down that did not have compatibility because of its shape or its size, and they would get stuck. We'd have to climb up onto this industrial belt and walk on the belt, which we were told not to do, but there was no other choice but to do it in order to break these jams. And sometimes it would just be an absolute sea. I mean, hundreds of packages coming down as soon as you broke that jam. It would be an overwhelming flood of items, like you can't even imagine. I was really, really good, very good at my job, and they told me so. When they fired me, I had not been to work. I think it had been 4 to 6 weeks at least since I'd been there, because I couldn't do it. I was so sick. I was actually almost on my deathbed. I almost died several times because of severe respiratory distress. I told them I was seriously ill and I was hospitalized, and the company didn't care. UPS views their workers as highly disposable, even if you've invested a large portion of your life in that company. They don't care about you. They'll discard you if you get hurt, or if you get very sick, or if there's a serious emergency in your family. This is not a company you want to have a career at. They are unscrupulous. They're unethical. The company as an institution has no integrity. They don't value their workers. You'll get sick out there from heat exhaustion, or you'll get injured on the job, and you'll have to file grievances through essentially what is like a union attorney, your union rep, or your shop steward, to prevent you from getting fired, when really the company should be giving you a break because you're sick or you're hurt and paying you disability. They don't want to pay workman's comp. They don't want to take care of you in your moment or your hour of need if something major is happening. If you're a domestic violence victim, like I was, you see the scars up here, they don't care. If you're a special victim of sexual assault, they don't care. You'll get about one moment, maybe a second of empathy, if that. I remember the night my dad died. I went into work. There were busted packages on the floor. My supervisor told my full-time boss and the regional supervisor my dad had died. And the full-time supervisor, who was over the region for this is Red River District, says, I don't give a fuck if his dad just died. I don't give a shit about his dad. I don't care. He was just having a huge tantrum. And just the statement to say that about somebody's family, about an employee who's been in the company for years and years. Somebody's just suffered a devastating loss. My dad was hit by an 18-wheeler on foot, and he died. It was bad. His body was almost unrecognizable. He was broken in half. And the company did not care at all. No support was offered, no financial support. No, oh, hey, I'm really, really sorry that this happened. If there's anything that you need, if you need an accommodation or some time off, anything, let us know. Nothing like that. Instead, I got that. The guy said something extremely derogatory. This is our regional supervisor. He was a white guy, light brown hair. I'll never forget what his face looked like. And there are no words. There's no words when somebody says something like that. Don't work for UPS. They'll throw you away. They'll steal your wages. They'll take your insurance. They won't want to accommodate you if you've got any major life events that come up. They're heartless. They're merciless. They have no integrity as an employer. And they're on the Fortune 500 list. They don't deserve their title or their status. They don't deserve to be on a best companies to work for list.